Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Michael Lawrence, Chief Executive of Asia House. Welcome to today's event, at which we'll explore the UK's Belt and Road strategy post-Brexit. Asia House is producing this conference in partnership with the University of Nottingham's Asia Research Institute. Belt and Road has been the subject of many discussions, many debates within these four walls, within Asia House, over the last 4 or 5 years. Keen interest from UK business to be involved in the BRI has been tempered by a cautious approach by UK government, fierce criticism of the project by the US, and international concerns about debt traps, possibly best exemplified by the Sri Lanka port experience and a few others. China has recalibrated its approach to BRI in response to some of these concerns. This was made very clear by President Xi at last year's Belt and Road Summit. But still, political scepticism remains. The UK, of course, has had its own distractions over the last few years. Brexit, and whether there was a government, how that government was going to form, what would happen. Well, there's now a little bit of clarity around that. So now that we are in the final stages of the UK leaving the EU, will the Belt and Road, and in fact, from our perspective, Asia more generally, feature more prominently on the political and business agenda? And how might that take shape? Well, that's the focus of today's event. I'm so very pleased to welcome back to Asia House Sir Douglas Flint, Chairman of Standard Life Aberdeen and the UK's Special Envoy to the BRI, who will deliver this morning's keynote address. Douglas has spoken at Asia House several times in recent years and has been a long-time supporter of this organisation. He's a member of the Asia House Advisory Board, and we're absolutely delighted he can join us today. After the keynote address, we'll dive more deeply into some of the issues with a distinguished group of experts, including Minister Ma Wei from the Chinese Embassy to the UK. But first, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Sir Douglas Flint.
Michael, thank you very much. Don't often get invited back, so thank you for doing that. Good morning. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to offer a few reflections this morning on how I see the UK's positioning with regard to China's Belt and Road Initiative in the post-Brexit world. I'll make the point up front that I make these remarks in a personal capacity and that I do not speak for Her Majesty's government, but I do have the privilege, as Michael said, of being Her Majesty's Treasury's Special Envoy for Financial and Professional Services to the BRI, a role which has been reconfirmed post-Brexit and post the recent election. In itself, that reconfirmation of the role was an important signpost to the relationship that the UK government wishes to build with China, and we've read today of the Prime Minister's encouraging conversation with President Xi yesterday that reinforces that position. In my view, how the UK approaches BRI post-Brexit is incredibly important to the continuation of the golden era of UK-China relations. First, as a sovereign nation responsible for our own decisions, we're able to demonstrate that we act independently of other interests where we believe that is the right thing to do, and we act with others when we believe that is right, which means that our relationship with China on BRI will be constructive and supportive where appropriate and challenging when necessary. A parallel from our history, of course, was being the first G7 country to sign up to the AIIB and working with the AIIB to build a model governance structure that is today widely respected. And to be frank, there was something of a hiatus in BRI discussions in the latter part of last year, as all attention here was allocated to Brexit, and it was not clear to China, or indeed to many in the UK, what the new government's position on China relations would be post-Brexit, particularly in light of deteriorating US-China trade relationship and US seeking to influence its allies' relationships. Second, the completion of our withdrawal from the EU frees capacity to think about other things, but importantly to expand independently our trading and investment relationships on a global basis. And given the scope of BRI participation, that global outreach will include very, very many countries involved in BRI, countries where the UK has a great interest in supporting the economic development that is being provided through BRI. And this so-called third country BRI involvement offers many opportunities for UK businesses. But let's step back first and reflect on the major challenges facing the world today, because these are, I think, highly relevant to how we should think about BRI. And they're probably even more relevant when we think of the current tragedy of the COVID-19 virus that reinforces the reality that we live in a world of shared futures where geographic and political boundaries do not always have relevance. So why is engagement with the BRI important to the UK? Think of the following global challenges. First, climate change and the implications on the sustainability of our current way of living, of the impact of rising temperatures on agriculture, sea levels, weather patterns, natural disasters, and the concentration of civilization in urban centres. Second, think about economic inequality and the tensions that are fueled by very different income levels and opportunities around the world, both within and between countries and indeed regions. And third, consider the possible impacts, particularly in light of the first two challenges, of the projected increase in the world population of over 2 billion citizens by 2050, with that increase largely concentrated in Africa and South Asia. Taken together, these challenges point to an existential risk to the developed world, not much spoken of as it's some years away, but in my view, very real nonetheless, that of migration patterns on a scale not seen in history, and for which the world socially and economically is totally unprepared. Projected population growth is concentrated in parts of the world projected to suffer the largest negative impacts on their GDP due to climate change, whether it's because of uninhabitable land, because of rising temperatures or flooding or failing agriculture and so on, or whether it's because of economic migration, because of lack of opportunity or threat to life in failed states, or simply the inability to accommodate population growth. It doesn't take a genius to foresee that the stress lines that will exist will be fundamental. And if Western Europe experienced the massive political strain that it did from seeking to accommodate a couple of million migrants over the last several years, consider how it will cope when the pressure is in the tens, if not the hundreds of millions of potential migrants. And of course, the UK would be very much be impacted by all of that. But what about the opportunities for the UK in its independent, re-energized global ambition? Think of the urbanization taking place in emerging markets, notably in China, ASEAN, Africa, and India, all of which is creating hundreds of millions of new and aspirational middle-class consumers who are the target today of every major consumer-led corporation. Think of the huge business opportunity from the massive infrastructure development needed to support both the urbanization referred to, together with that needed to support the more affluent lifestyles that the burgeoning middle class will demand in terms of diet, energy consumption, transportation, leisure, healthcare. On top of this, there are unprecedented sustainable financing needs to build and replace infrastructure to meet the commitments that have been made in relation to the transition to a lower intensity carbon economy and use of all the world's scarce resources more efficiently. Unfortunately, and fortunately, we're embarking on this journey at a time of current and projected historically low, even negative interest rates. And we're also doing so at a time of demographic aging, during which the need for fixed income savings products, which first offer a higher yield than government bonds, not difficult, and second, which demonstrate a legacy of contribution to future generations, are evidenced by the explosion of commitment and interest to ESG, environment, social government investing, and impact investing. And what is absolutely clear is that the challenges that I've described and the opportunities for productivity improvement on the one hand and expansion of economic activity on the other cannot conceivably be adequately addressed by any country acting alone or even in regional groupings, given the interdependencies and interconnections of living on the same planet. As President Xi said in the last Belt and Road Forum, we're all swimming in the same sea, and we can't separate that into separate lakes. And so the evolution of what if there was a project that addressed or attempted to address all of these challenges and opportunities? The evolution of what BRI comprises has been rapid and dramatic. what started somewhat narrowly as trade route definition and reinforcement has in fact migrated to globalization 2.0 in my view, with a vision focused on building the infrastructure that underpins economic growth and builds connectivity to the rest of the world under an overriding vision of shared prosperity, a vision no doubt deliberately designed to project a distinctive counterpart to growing protectionist and nationalist tendencies being expressed elsewhere. And the BRI vision included creating a vast network of railways, energy pipelines, power plants, highways, logistics hubs, streamlined border crossings, both westward through the former Soviet republics and southward to Pakistan, India, the rest of Southeast Asia, and into Africa. I always toss up at this point and say, if we get into the romance of the old Silk Road, which started in the ancient capital of China, of Xi'an, and ended in one of the most romantic cities in Europe. Does anyone know where it ended? Macclesfield. Not a lot of people know that. That's your pub quiz question that will win you a point and no one else. True. It was the home of the English silk industry. So Macclesfield, romantically twinned with Xi'an. So, how should other countries position themselves against this vision? And it's clear with over 170 countries and supranational organizations who have now signed up in one way or another to Belt and Road that there is momentum towards this initiative, which has taken shape and is moving forward. And with over 100 sovereign nations signed up, it goes well beyond the original trade routes. As I always say, if you're going from China to Europe, going via Argentina has a bit of a compass failure there. Many countries clearly seek to be recipients of the infrastructure development that they're unable to finance on their own, and many countries have capabilities to offer and connections to make to recipient countries that will facilitate project definition and financing. And all this is taking place at a pivotal point in history. China's emergence as the second largest economy, the largest contributor to global economic growth, the second most prolific filer of patents, a technology leader in so many areas, notably, as we know, in 5G and internet-based e-commerce, in financial transactions and social media, and the consumer market that virtually every international company seeks to position itself with or alongside, either as a participant or a partner, is a pivotal change in history. I listed the four major challenges, namely climate change, economic inequality, population growth, and related migration trends that require coordinated solutions. But there are many more that are shared challenges, and where failure to address these at a country level impacts citizens of neighboring countries or indeed the global community very seriously. And of course, for example, environmental protection. None of these can be adequately addressed by nations acting alone. And addressing these challenges should be positive, very positive for the global economy, for the world's financial system and its institutions. Yet the reality, this should be a time of great opportunity, the reality seems very different. What do we see when we look at financial markets today? Largely driven by fractured political systems and narrow short-term self-interest in investment markets. We see greater extraction of capital from public markets than is being invested. We see unusually low levels of investment activity in the developed world, an inability in many democratic political systems to take decisions around the opportunities where they extend beyond the life of the various parliaments involved. We're seeing pullback from multilateralism. We're seeing concern over dominant technology platforms, the winner-takes-all challenge the world faces, cyber threat, privacy concerns, unequal distribution of the world's resources, environmental, climate change concerns, populism, nationalism threatening what we historically thought of as liberal democracies, strained fiscal budgets and trade tensions impacting all the major trading blocs, and of course in particular the world's two largest economies, the US and China. It was thinking about all these challenges that made it compelling to accept the role of Her Majesty's Treasury Special Envoy for Professors in December 2017. What was I doing? The excitement was thinking about how the UK, and in particular the City of London, could play an important and supportive role. Although the UK has indeed considerable expertise and experience in infrastructure design and development international, that experience and expertise is but a fraction of what China has delivered, what it has built over the last decade or so. And so it would be unrealistic to suggest that this is the most meaningful contribution that the UK can make to the Belt and Road Initiative. So it's London's position, or the UK's position, as the leading international capital market that can most usefully support BRI. The City of London has for generations attracted capital from all over the world to invest that capital all over the world through structures and funds that global investors have come to trust because of the robust diligence undertaken on their behalf on project viability and governance, underpinned by transparency and a widely respected legal framework. So throughout the work that we've been doing in conjunction with our Chinese counterparts, the underlying theme is to project how the UK can build capacity for the Belt and Road Initiative by working together to define the financing standards, the viability proof, designing the risk mitigations, the transparency and governance criteria, the dispute resolution procedures, the legal underpinnings that would be necessary to attract the largest pool of incremental international capital to support qualifying BRI projects. And the ultimate ambition is to contribute to the creation of an infrastructure asset class that would be based upon BRI. China, I believe, recognizes that gaining international financing support for BRI is dependent upon confidence around integrity, sustainability, and economic validation of individual projects. It recognizes the City of London's role can be hugely valuable and influential given the city's reputation, and indeed is complementary and additive to what China brings to the table. So how do we project the UK's capabilities and capacity to support the economic objectives of BRI? First, the Treasury, together with the private sector, formed an expert board, which I co-chair with the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. That was created during, or promised during, the 9th UK-China Economic and Financial Dialogue that took place at the end of 2017. And the purpose of the board is to provide a forum for generating and developing BRI policy recommendations that are necessary to crowd in private sector capital and expertise at scale. And we have our next meeting next week. Second, we established what's called the Infrastructure Financing Exchange to provide a staff to the expert board and also to provide a register of BRI projects to get people familiar with what's going on around the world, but also to offer a focal point for companies to express their interest in being involved and to coordinate the project pipeline opportunities that exist. We focused initially, or are focused initially, on 3 work streams: identifying in conjunction with our Chinese counterparts the exemplar projects that will demonstrate the attributes needed to attract international finance, working together to agree on what constitutes a BRI project that would be attractive to the international community. What are the minimum criteria on project viability, legal framework, governance, dispute resolution, etc., that to be so attractive? And working together to agree BRI bond standards that will facilitate liquidity and again build capacity. All of this, of course, to be backed by robust and comprehensive BRI data series, information that will be crucial in helping analysts and asset managers remain alive to the trends and opportunities that are shaping the development of the BRI across such a broad sweep of geography. In this way, we aim to build BRI financing capacity as well as accelerating the creation of the innovative financing and risk management tools that are needed to meet the diverse needs of contractors and investors and bring finance to parts of the world that today have inability to get that money. The ultimate ambition is to help ensure that the BRI kite mark is synonymous with a robust, high-quality, liquid and standardized global asset class, and more broadly, to provide an affirmation of the benefits of globalization through shared prosperity. Collectively, we believe that these attributes can contribute to the real possibility of creating a globally recognized asset class. And the fact that China last summer appointed a counterpoint to the role I have, the Envoy role, who is in the process of appointing a parallel expert board in China with the ambition of the 2 boards meeting when circumstances are calmer, to iron out the obstacles to building the more international participation in BRI projects. That creation of a counterpoint is very encouraging, and also reflects the reality that the scale of ambition for BRI is not capable of being delivered by a single country, and clearly the pandemic impact to China's economy will make this even more apparent. And in this world of complex geopolitical relationships, we need to recognize broader challenges remain to gaining international support, largely attributable to the extraordinary scale of the BRI's ambition. Attributable also to geopolitical tension over China's emergence as the second largest and fastest growing economy, concerns that exist over interconnected infrastructure in a technology-driven future, and concern over the debt burden impact of BRI on recipient countries and with regard to how BRI will build China's international influence. These challenges and concerns are often forcibly expressed. Will recipient countries be overburdened with debt? Are the projects in reality designed to be an extension of China's soft, hard power? What are the geopolitical and security implications? Is this a form of economic colonization? What legal framework will be allowed to protect investors? Will projects take care to prevent corruption, meet transparent procurement standards, have appropriate environmental standards, address dispute resolution, health and safety concerns, labor protection, and so on and so on? And these are all legitimate questions and challenges that need to be asked. And depending on your objective, and this is true in so many things and what has been done to date, it's possible to find projects that confirm, whatever perspective you've got, the confirmation of bias that exists in today's world. And this highlights the challenges posed in today's climate of populism and nationalism. How can any country lead an agenda of shared prosperity without attracting cynicism and distrust? And this is addressing these concerns and bringing a better understanding, I believe, is also part of the role that we can play in the UK in getting people to understand the facts and make their own minds up, as opposed to reading the confirmation bias that may complicate that understanding. And of course, China has unique challenges. The penetration and influence of the state, both real and imagined, within the economy and its major companies makes it difficult for outsiders to distinguish between state actions and private sector actions, and we've seen that played out in the last year or so with Huawei. In BRI today, this is exacerbated by the fact that most projects have been almost entirely Chinese built and financed, with governmental support around insurance and risk mitigation. Transparency and greater international participation in the next phase of BRI will be very helpful. It's also not simple to demonstrate shared prosperity, because over what timescale should this be measured? There are very senior economists in the room, so I've got to be very careful what I say now. In my view, because I'm not an economist, economic viability is very different from financial affordability. The former takes much longer to validate and ought to take into account the economic activity generated by the infrastructure that's being developed. Think in an Asian context how Chek Lap Kok Airport in Hong Kong was thought to be an extravagant mistake when it was first built, or the one I prefer in a way for this country is Eurotunnel was a financial disaster. The banks wrote off half the debt, and yet today you can hardly imagine there not being a link between the south of England and France, and today one can only imagine what such a project would cost and how long it would take to get off the ground. There's also a problem with the promotion of many notable achievements of BRI without acknowledging that there have been challenges, mistakes made, and lessons have been learned. And if only successes are discussed, there's a degree of suspicion around claims that are made. China is usefully doing much, much more today to coordinate BRI with multilateral and national priorities to attract support and funding. Tying the objectives of BRI to the UN Sustainable Development Goals is making great sense. And it's good to see China now doing this, and it's good to see organizations like the World Bank and the IMF recognizing this. But there needs to be a global discussion on prioritization and inherent trade-offs between economic growth, social progress, environmental protection. If we seek to criticize BRI projects, or indeed any infrastructure projects, for not being as green as they could be, it misses the point that they're often a great deal greener than they might otherwise be. And in this regard, the UK and China have long cooperated on green financing principles, leading the world, for example, in green bonds. So as the world's leading international financial centre, the world's most respected legal system, and with an independence of thought that carries weight around the world, I believe the UK also has the opportunity to engage openly and lead the debate on these challenges, on the challenges that are often raised when the impact assessment of BRI is offered in international fora. As BRI infrastructure is built, how should we think about connecting the hard infrastructure to the soft infrastructure that makes these linkages work? Could these linkages be dominated by a single technology framework? You can see the challenges that exist in many Western governments as Chinese technology, especially telecommunications, is embedded in critical energy transportation and infrastructure. And that gets us back to the openness of procurement in BRI contracts and building the understanding that needs to be developed in what is actually happening in reality. Another thing, how should we think about the impact of BRI on the future of the Chinese currency and in the Chinese legal system? And finally, how do we avoid BRI contributing to a polarized world, a world of forced choices, as two great powers with different political systems seem to be on collision course? And these are all issues that we have in the work that we have done with China, that we in the UK side have raised openly and constructively in dialogues, and that constructive challenge and consideration of how external parties could view BRI gives our Chinese counterparties insight on those international perspectives on BRI, the perspectives that are designed to be constructive and helpful to that understanding and helping to build capacity to meet the BRI's economic objectives. In the Second Belt and Road Forum, which took place almost a year ago, President Xi used his opening remarks to address many, if not all, of the issues that I've talked about in terms of challenges, highlighting the need for innovation, for adoption of green investment principles, for the need for transparency, open procurement, absolute prohibition of corruption in BRI projects, cooperation around customs tax, auditing and supervision arrangements, as he slammed protectionism and called for more free trade, highlighting the importance of consultation, cooperation, and the shared benefits to deliver win-win outcomes. The next steps are clearly to move from words to action. And I'd like to think that agenda of remarks wasn't just those of us in the UK who were involved in the dialogue, but many people were. But those comments, those challenges as to how other people could perceive BRI, I think, were taken on board and were very much reflected in President Xi's opening remarks. The scale of ambition of BRI is extraordinarily impressive. And if we stand back, if the world is to accommodate population growth, if it is to address the challenges of climate change and inequality, it needs an extraordinary program of infrastructure development to build out economic ecosystems across the developing world to prevent that uncontrolled migration the world is not prepared for. BRI and its ambition and its impact comes closest to a plan to do this and comes with substantial financial support. So in a positive frame of mind, I believe we should think of BRI as a China-led, not a Chinese global infrastructure development initiative, which is designed to create opportunities well beyond the infrastructure created itself and involving all the activities spawned by the connections and capacity that that infrastructure, hard and soft, provides. The UK has the opportunity as a key trading partner of China in the golden era to help to build that capacity, to participate in key projects offering design, project management, risk mitigation, insurance, legal and financial services, the things we do really well. And equally important, through promoting and assuring agreed financing and transparency standards, contributing to broader international confidence in projects that meet the necessary criteria. And convening the discussions and facilitating the partnerships needed to deliver this vision should now be amongst our key priorities. I'm encouraged by the fact that in recent years, no two countries have done more to prepare global capital markets for the 21st century than the UK and China working together. Our cooperation in areas as diverse as fintech, green finance, and the internationalization of the RMB have delivered tangible benefits to businesses, savers, and investors everywhere. More broadly, the UK welcomes China's growing contribution to and support for globalization of trade and multilateralism. As I said at the outset, the UK was the first major Western nation to sign up to the AIIB, and the trade flows and investment flows between China and UK have never been stronger. And as we embark upon an infrastructure development program here, hopefully there will be opportunities to expand. So in conclusion, substantial global infrastructure development is absolutely crucial to meeting the challenges faced across the world. China's offer of leadership and sponsorship in the creation of a future of shared prosperity through BRI, a vision that is allied with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, is, in my view, compelling, and the international community should work through engagement to shape these initiatives for the mutual benefits we all seek. And I believe the UK has an important soft power role in seeking to facilitate this, and a role we should grasp with enthusiasm. So lots to think about. Thank you very much.